Welcome, everyone, to Deep in the Plus. I'm your host, Rob Whiteside. Thank you, as always, for being with us. Please, if you have not already, subscribe to WDWNT TV for more great content on this channel. And please give us a thumbs up as it helps people to find us. And it rewards the egos of myself and my good friend, Allison. How are you?
Good evening, everyone. I'm doing great. I'm so happy to be here with you tonight, Rob.
Well, I appreciate you coming in. You and I have done quite a few reviews, and I appreciate it.
Mhm.
Here it is, Disenchanted. It's the sequel to the 2009, I believe, Enchanted. And you know what? The first movie we reviewed, and I love that movie. There's so many cool things about it. I feel like it's sort of a silent, underrated thing. Anybody who's watched it likes it, but at the same time, not everybody talks about that one. I feel like that one is a kind of
Mhm.
a a well kept secret, maybe, but I don't know too many people who are like, I didn't really like Enchanted.
Yeah.
So when they talked about this coming out as a sequel, what were your first thoughts? Were you like, yeah, finally they're going to tell the rest of the story, or were you like, this could be a mistake?
Yeah, I was a little surprised, and I was very worried. I didn't think that they would take that much care with the script. But I think you're right. This is one of those like movies that's like sort of a crossover movie. Like there are people who are like big fans of this that don't like any other movies of this ilk, but the original is like so good that they watch it over and over again. I have friends who were in their early 20s, mid 20s at the time, male friends in their early and mid 20s that were that age when it came out, and like loved it, and then are excited. We're excited to watch the sequel, but I think everyone is a little bit weary. Like, do we actually need this?
Yeah, I think we ask ourselves that a lot when it comes to sequels is like, did this story need to go on? We were talking about like Nightmare Before Christmas, one of my favorite movies. I don't really think I ever want them to go back to that IP. I want them to stay. I want it to stay in that little bubble, that perfect little bubble, and that be my memory of that movie. Even though I love the characters and I love that IP. For this one, I don't feel like we needed to go back. But one of the things I always have a problem with sequels is they need to break the happily ever after. Like you need to go and say, all right, everything that we made right at the end of that movie, we need to break it so we have a reason to move forward in the next one. That's really kind of the basic makeup of a movie like that. Sometimes things are different, but usually that's the case is that they need to go through a new struggle. And in this one, they had the happily ever after. Everything worked out for Nancy and Edward. Everything worked out for Giselle and Robert. It was all, sunshine and rainbows and the end. And then this one comes along, and again, you got to know by the title that it's Disenchanted, that it's going to be kind of like, here they're going to take their happily ever after, and they're going to talk about the struggles that they have after, and they kind of joke about it in the story as Pip is telling the story to the other two little chipmunks. The one of them's like, wait, after happily ever after? There's no after happily ever after. That's how it ends. It's happily ever after, and he's like, oh, but there's another book, so we're gonna read it. And so when they start reading this extra book called Disenchanted, it's this, that's their way to tell us what's happened to our crew since the last time we've seen them. What happened to Robert? What happened to Giselle and Robert getting married, having a new baby, and all of that stuff. So it was explained in an animated way, and then they kind of just transfer us back into the real world. Um, I'm not really sure how I feel about that. Like, part of me wanted this, and maybe we could talk about this at the end. Part of me wanted this to be animated. Like, let's go from the real world back into
Mm.
Andalasia and have that be the problem. I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, I like that. Well, I like that how it started brought you right back to the beginning of the original movie, right? It starts with the animated sequence, and just as the original starts, it's in the exact same style. And then we get back to the real world. Yeah, it probably could have worked as an animated feature, and then maybe the characters wouldn't have like aged too, because Amy Adams is now like 47. She looks fantastic, but she's still 47 years old with a new baby, which is kind of interesting. It took a while for them to have that baby. There's a big gap in time. But I thought that the way they did the narrative, where it's like, okay, well now we have a teenager, and that is really hard, and also we're moving our family to a small town, and that is also hard. So the story itself worked really well, and I ended up liking the live action in the end, but because it sort of made me feel like I was just an extension of the original.
Yeah. One of the things that we do learn in the opening narrative that I'm not sure I knew was that, like, Giselle's origin, that she was found as a baby in a basket,
Yeah.
in the woods, and we don't really know that much about her when we first meet her. We just know that she's this princess, and she's looking for the love of her life, and it's Edward, and how it goes from there. But I don't know that we knew that she was found
Right.
in the woods as an abandoned child.
Right. And injecting that made me think that that was going to be the happily ever after, that she wanted to have a connection to her parents and that it was going to be like, we're going to go on a journey to find my parents so they can see how my life turned out. And then it just was like, it was just thrown in there and dropped.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it was one of those where it was like, okay, well, you know, what can we do with this story? There's a ton of things you could do, and I'm not sure this is the way I would have gone. And even from the trailer that we saw originally, I'm not sure this is what I expected. I think I expected
Mm,
them to be more in Andalasia, like when you saw Robert in his like, in his I guess medieval clothes, and you saw
right.
the Maya Rudolph as this evil queen. I felt like it was. I thought and we'll get to that in a second, I guess. But that Maya Rudolph was like a known evil queen, and she was kind of like maybe from some other like Andalasia adjacent village, and she's come to put some weird curse. And she was really more of a victim in this whole thing than she was actually, the perpetrator. So the perpetrator was really Giselle by mistake.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
I think I would like to blame Morgan a little bit, but that's beside the point.
I think
But
that's because you're the father of like teenagers. You're just
yeah,
getting through
exactly.
that stage.
Yeah,
I
Morgan,
had a lot more empathy for Morgan.
if you had just appreciated what you had, you'd have been fine. So when they open up and they tell the story, they tell about how their castle in the sky had gotten too small because now they have Sophia, and it's Morgan and Robert and
Which that
Giselle
apartment
and
is not too small for anyone. That apartment was ginormous.
True. Well, and there's a part where when Edward comes to visit them and he looks at their new house and he's like, Robert, are you poor now? Even though they have this giant house, it's like it's dilapidated, and yeah, that was kind of funny. So when it opens up with all of this and then it cuts to real life, they're moving away. They're moving to this new world called Monroeville in the suburbs. Like it couldn't be more like you know, Smallville, Pleasantville. Couldn't be more, that kind of a move. And so when they're going to this place, Morgan is fighting him the whole way. And the thing that I'm thinking at that point is, when Morgan was little, she just in that first movie, she just idolized and loved Giselle, and would that she was amazed by her and everything she could do. And so at this point, I guess they're showing that as a teenager, she's just over that. But that's another one of those things where it seems like there had to have been some other road other than her growing into being a teenager that made her so disenchanted with Giselle, right?
Oh, that's interesting. I had a lot of empathy for her, and I didn't find her to be too bratty of a teenager. I thought it would be easier for them to make her be like really bratty, but all of the things that she got kind of frustrated about were all understandable. Like plucking her out from her home that she knows and all of the like the people she knows and putting her in a small town as a kid that grew up in Manhattan. That's not easy. And then like all her clothes get ruined and she's gotta like go to school wearing her stepmom's clothes, which are not her style. Like that's all stuff to be grumbly about, but she was also like still kind of appropriately like respectful, just like occasionally a little bit snarky, which like seemed warranted. But she still seemed to like care about and love Giselle. She just like the childlike infatuation she had with her when she was 8 or 9 just looked different
Yeah,
from a
that's true.
teenager. But I'm used to
Um,
my child changing like every 6 months into a different human at this point because I have an almost 4 year old.
Plus, you were probably a much better teenage girl than I was, so that you probably have more experience with it in that case. I do
I
want to
was a
say,
much bigger monster than this child.
okay, all right. You tell me that afterwards. I wanted to say we got a pretty full house tonight, so thank you guys for being in the chat. SeaWorld, Chief, Rosita, Dawn, Joe, Arch Fox. thank you guys so much for being with us. We appreciate you hanging out with us tonight as we're talking about Disenchanted. Um, so again, when this movie was first announced, I was pretty like excited about it, and at the same time, again, a little nervous about it because of how much I liked the first movie. But it's neat in a way to see all these people come back and redo the roles that they had. Obviously, if it's some kind of a movie where kind of like that vacation movie with Ed Helms, where it's like this is almost no one from the first movie. Like we're totally redoing things
Oh,
here.
right, the National Lampoons, right?
Then it's a
Okay.
little shaky. But this
Yeah.
is they brought back the whole cast.
Hmm.
Patrick Dempsey is back, and you've got Amy Adams, and she's a producer. And then they bring in new characters like Yvette Nicole Brown, who must be under some crazy contract with Disney because she does everything Disney, ABC, Disney Plus, all over the place. And then you had the interesting part was you had a different Morgan. Like I was trying to struggle with it because she's in the movie. The original Morgan is in the movie. But the only thing that we could come up with is that maybe it's because there were a lot of songs for Morgan to sing, and maybe the original actress was not the the good singer. Gabriella Baldacchino. I'm probably brutalizing that name, but is the girl who played New Morgan. And I think it's Rachel Covey might be the name of the girl who played the original Morgan, but she's actually in the movie for like a hot second in the town scene. So, but it's weird to me that you would recast her
Yeah.
unless the only reason was she just couldn't sing, and they had a lot
Yeah.
of songs for her to sing.
They could have changed that. I mean, the original didn't even make use of having Idina Menzel singing, right? Like she didn't sing in the original, so they could have probably changed the narrative so she wasn't singing quite so much. It could also be, and this is like that a lot of child stars are really good at like that kind of child star acting, but like as grown-ups, it's just not delivering it well. And I actually thought that this actress was really very good in the role. So maybe she just didn't read for it well or something, and they had to replace it in order for the acting to be up to par.
Yeah, that could be the case. She was a little girl when she was in
Hmm.
the original one, so there's a good possibility that maybe she was just not. She didn't have the chops to carry it as a grown up Morgan. But there's the one scene where she's in, and this is going to be a blurry shot of it, but is this scene when she's
Oh
asking, well, what's
wow.
tonight? And she says, "Milady, it's the festival." And scene, and that's it. But I mean, she looks very similar to the girl that they did cast, so I think they did a pretty good job of that. And again, when you go
Yep.
from it's been what 13 years, so I mean,
Yeah. I think
obviously,
longer. Yeah.
yeah, that's true. But obviously, you
Seven
don't.
or eight.
She could have changed a lot at that point, so I think that
Hmm.
they probably pulled it off. But everybody else returns. One of the things I noticed, and you tell me if this stuck out to you, because it stuck out to me, is that some of the main characters, like Jason Marsden, Patrick Dempsey, and Adina Menzel, I feel like they weren't they weren't seen as much as they were in the first movie. Like, do you think that was
Yeah.
like, are we paying Patrick Dempsey by the minute? Is that why maybe he wasn't in this one as much? Because Robert's story is really,
Yeah.
I'm not even going to say a B story. It's like a C story to this whole thing. They kind of really put him away for a while. Like, do you think it was because they were like Patrick Dempsey's too expensive, or what?
Yeah, or schedules. Maybe he didn't have enough as much time to film or something. You got other projects. I don't know, but his whole role was just to like run away the entire time and be gone. It was funny. I was, and maybe it was also to make room for having having new characters and having like a new villain, as but as you say, she's more of a victim in this, but make room for more of that, make room for an Idina Menzel song. Like I don't know, but yeah, definitely did not see them anywhere near as much. It was more about this new town, more about Morgan, and more
Monroeville,
about yeah, Monroeville.
Monroe, Alasia. Um, so you were talking about music. I felt like the first movie, the music was appropriate for that one. I don't feel like Enchanted, the first one, was a musical. I feel like it just
Mm,
had music because that was her personality, her fish out of water. In her world, she was always singing, and so she would sing, in the kind of, I'm thinking Will Ferrell and Wolf, I'm singing, I'm standing here, I'm singing. She would just start singing in the park or whatever, and that was kind of her thing. In this one, there was a lot more, it felt like more like a musical. It was only 8 minutes in before
mhm.
we get like our first big number from her. And then there were so many other songs in here. Alan Menken comes back to do it. Alan Menken, genius, love
Yeah.
him. But at the same time, some of the music I felt like was unnecessary.
Yeah, well, it's really hard to hit the same notes as the first one because that soundtrack is so good and you can listen to the songs over and over and over again. I did
Yeah.
not find myself like being like, oh, I need to hear these songs again, even though like they were really well performed. Like the performances were great, the voices were beautiful, but I'm not like listening to the soundtrack at night and learning the music like I was with the first one. But I think you're right. There's like a difference in tone because the first one is like, here's this like cheery woman who is
Right.
a musical and a human being, and now here's that same woman, but she's turned the whole town into some version of some twisted version of that, and so everything was playing the same note. It wasn't just like she's a fish out of water. And that changes the tone and it changes how the music is received.
Yeah. And when I said 8 minutes in, I meant the first time Amy Adams sings. Pip
Yeah.
actually sings that Andalasia song.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and then she sings a song called Even More Enchanted, which is a little on the nose. Um, but I feel like that one made sense to me because it's like, oh, she's like, okay, look, Morgan's not feeling it. Let me give her some of this, like, old school Andalasia magic singing and bring this whole thing to light for her. There was that one scene where she's doing that around the workers in the house, and she has these flowers made of newspaper, and she hands them to the worker, and he smells them. Why would he smell them? They're gonna smell like newspaper.
Yeah.
I don't know. Also, where do you get newspaper? It's 2022. Who's out there getting a newspaper right now? That's crazy talk.
Yeah. I haven't
Uh
touched one of those in a long time.
right. There's something very tactile about them. But anyway, there are a lot of songs in here. I didn't find one that I really liked, and I think that for them the showstopper was perfect. The one that Morgan sings walking through the town.
Mhm.
But Batter, the duet with Maya Rudolph and Amy Adams, that one I could dig. I don't know whether it
Yeah.
was the way they put it together with the slash down the middle or the fact that they were kind of adversarial in it and almost like angry singing. I don't know, but that one felt like a good old fashioned Alan Menken Disney song to me, and I liked that one. And then you mentioned they didn't really use Idina Menzel in the first movie. That Love Power song, I can get behind that one. And I think
Yeah.
it's her. I don't think it's necessarily
Yeah.
the lyrics or anything else. It's just her killing it, and she doesn't kill it like as Elsa either, right? Like it sounds like a little different to me. Like not like I'm hearing Elsa singing some other song. It really to me sounds uniquely Idina Menzel, and
Yeah.
that was the one that stood out to me.
Yeah. Yeah, God, her voice is so recognizable in everything she does. I've certainly been listening to her since the mid 90s when the Rent soundtrack from the original Broadway show dropped. But every role she does, she has this like, it's unmistakably her. Whether it's Elphaba or Elsa or Maureen from Rent or this role. But yeah, you can't not like enjoy listening to her to want to listen to it. She's fantastic, and fully agree on Batter. That was, I think, the hands down the best song in the movie. And I actually didn't know that. I'm sorry, what's her name? The Maya Rudolph could sing like that.
Well, she does that with like Martin Short and a bunch of things that they do together
Oh.
sometimes, and Amy Poehler. So I've heard her sing. Like she and Will Ferrell are both like they can sing, but they can't like sang. You know what I'm saying?
I
Um,
don't know. She was really belting it out there. I was really impressed with pretty complex harmonies.
okay. I knew this was going to happen the second I said this about newspaper. Rosita's in chat said we still get the newspaper, Rob.
Aw.
um, and then somebody was saying something about I use it to clean my windows. So, and and then Dawn says she's got a digital subscription. I do think though that's one of those things that I always use as an example is the newspaper that most people get information on their phone, but there's a lot of like I said, it's very tactile with the newspaper when you actually
Yeah.
actually can get it. There was something about waking up to that Sunday morning edition that was like this big around and having the color funnies and the coupons and the
Yeah.
Black Friday ads. Oh man, that was good stuff.
I was
That's
really
taking
into
me
that
back.
until like 2004. So I always like to have like the feeling of the physical paper.
Yeah. So anyway, back to back to the movie. Yeah, so the music, I do think some of it felt forced to me, honestly.
Mhm.
But those couple of songs, "Batter" and Love Power. I don't even. I'm not even sure that like it's a weird title, but it's just Idina Menzel. It's just like that's one of those
Mhm.
things where you like go back and listen to like you were saying, Defying Gravity, or Frozen 1 or 2. Pick either one. She was great in both. Like Into the Unknown, so good.
Oh yeah.
But the funny thing is that usually in Disney movies they would have the radio version during the closing credits sung by somebody else. If you think about Frozen, it was
Mhm.
Demi Lovato. Um, True to Your Heart, like that song was who was that? That was 98 Degrees and Stevie Wonder, I think. So I mean, but
Good
like
memory.
it's usually a radio version that they play
Mhm.
during the credits, and they did sort of a clean radio version, but it was still Idina Menzel singing it in the credits, and I thought it was really well timed with the slight animation that they were doing in the closing credits. I thought that was really neat. So it was neat that they came back to that almost to remind you, like, hey, this is the one. Like, this is the one you're gonna. If you were in the theater walking out, this is the one you would sing. Speaking of which, do you think this would have been a different movie had they released it in the theater? Like, it still boggles my mind what things they target to Disney Plus, Pinocchio, or what things that they like will throw in the theater. Sometimes, like we saw with uh, a couple of movies, like like Soul was probably supposed to be in the theater. They put it on Disney Plus, but with this one, it's interesting to me that that they did it for Disney Plus and not in the theater, especially on the heels of two other franchises. Santa Claus is on one side, going back to that IP, and Hocus Pocus 2 on the other side of that. Here are three big time kind of legendary Disney IPs, and they brought them all to Disney Plus September, November, and December. Like, boom, boom, boom.
Mhm.
Actually, November and November.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know why, but I do like, so I think I'm the target demographic of several of those because they're things that I watched, and I still haven't been back to the theaters. Part of that is having a small child. Most of that is having a small child, and just life having changed so much in the last 3 years, it's just now not part of my life to go to the theaters. And I know I'm not alone there because a lot of other people I know who are my age who have small children are not going to the theaters. So they're trying to get people, the target demographic, to watch it. Maybe they feel like they need to put it streaming because a lot of us are not going to theaters. When my daughter's a little bit older and I don't have to worry about paying for a babysitter to be gone for 2 hours, like then might look different. But if they're trying to get these people in the, I don't know, like the 30 to 40 age range, maybe that's why.
yeah. I guess that makes sense. It's just it's still it seems like you could have gone to the theaters with this one, but it almost seems like they don't want to do that with anything that's not Marvel anymore. Avatar will be interesting to see if it makes its money back. Apparently, it's got to make like $2 billion to break even, something ridiculous. And then you've got Star Wars. A lot of that content's come to Disney Plus, so maybe it's just the way things are going. But also, I feel like a lot of times they don't it feels like the production is just a tad bit less when they know it's coming to Disney Plus, like Pinocchio. Like I
Yeah.
feel like you've got Tom Hanks, go all
Hmm.
in, but it felt
Hmm.
like they didn't. We can talk about Pinocchio another time, but that was just the thing. So, again, you brought back the original cast. You brought back Alan Menken. All of that stuff put together. You've got the family. They're moving to the suburbs. They don't like what they're, the house they're coming into is a little bit of a challenge. Morgan's a little bit of a challenge. And then they have this well in their backyard, because who doesn't have a wishing well in your backyard when you move in? Like they must have been looking for it. Like, here are the requirements. We have to have a living room, formal dining room, wishing well. Like, I mean, it's just, so there's a wishing well in the backyard, which just is so convenient for Edward and Nancy to use as a portal from Andalasia. They show up, and Robert is like, he's got to go, and he's in a hurry, but all of a sudden he can stop and talk to them. But he's got to go catch the train, but he's going to stop and talk to them. Edward hands him a sword, and he, for some reason, takes it with him to work, even though at that point he
Yeah.
wasn't wearing his coat. He could have certainly put it down in the corner and gone ahead and done it later, but he decides he's going to take it with him to on the train, which I don't know if they let you do that. Like, you can't
No,
even come
actually, you
into.
cannot. You cannot have a sword in New York City. You actually can't have a blade longer than 4 inches in New York City. Can't have things called a cane sword. That's actually an item. Those are prohibited in New York State to carry around in public. So
I
nobody
love
try
that you know
this.
that.
Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can't even have a selfie stick when you go into Disney, much less I can imagine carrying a sword through the train station on your way to New
Yeah.
York. But anyway, it adds to the comedy, I guess. But he gives him a sword, and then they give her a wand. This is the part that's weird. I brought this up with Hocus Pocus and the fact that it's like, well, a virgin has to light the black flame candle. Like, why? Like, why does that have to be a thing? In this one, they make it this pain point to say it's got to be a true daughter of Andalasia. A true daughter. Like, they say it over and over again. Like, they're trying to twist that knife into Morgan's heart to make her be the person that she becomes that causes all this to happen. That drives me nuts.
Hmm.
Just
Well,
putting it
I
out there.
thought, yeah, I mean, it's funny because she turns out to be a true daughter of Andalasia in the end, but it was like really painful for me when Giselle is like, "Oh, you're a true daughter." She's like speaking to the baby, like that's, I mean, it's just my heart just broke for, the daughter that she raised who didn't have a mom, and had been calling her stepmom mom since she was 8. Like that has to be really painful no matter what age you are to see like, oh, now my stepmom has a daughter that she shares genetics with, and now I'm not. I don't mean as much to her. Like that's painful, and that made sense.
Yeah, no, yeah, but it's the thing that kind of puts her over the top is that, she's like, okay, now I don't feel like your daughter. I don't want to live in this town. All of these things leading up to her kind of deciding to push back on them. Also, they've set up her room for her, and it's really nice. And yet, then they flip the switch, and it just happens to set 2 boxes on fire that are all of her clothes. My daughter is very much a minimalist, and she would definitely have more than 2 boxes of clothes to her name. Especially, I don't know. Dad's a lawyer; he should be able to pull that off. I guess I don't know. It seems
Yeah.
weird that that's
And do you
all of her clothes.
remember when she went shopping in the original movie and how many like bags that she and Giselle came out of like the several boutiques with? It was out of control. And the original movie ended with like Giselle having her own little like bippity boppity boutique, like small business.
Yes,
And it,
yes.
like I want to know what happened to that because I imagine that was wildly successful. And I bet you could have bought an already renovated mansion in Monroeville, if if the economics of that panned out. But I don't know, maybe not because the housing prices in the suburbs at the time they were probably buying this house were kind of out of control. So
Well, I was going to ask you if I had missed something with that, because that was a big
mhm.
deal in the end of the first movie, is that she has this dressmaking business, and what happened. Like, Robert is a successful lawyer. She is
Mhm.
has a successful business, and obviously, things change when you have a baby. But at the same time, like, you would think if they were moving out to Monroeville that they would be able to bring that business with them, or that she would commute
Mhm.
back or something. But yeah, like, did I miss something, or did they just never reference it again?
They're like she has a baby now, so she can't have a business. I don't really,
Ooh,
I
come
don't
on! It's
really know.
2022. It's almost 2023. We can't say that. That's
Well,
crazy.
that's what the narrative is telling me. They just completely dropped her lovely, beautiful small business. And also like, even without that, like Robert was doing really well. We talked about it when we reviewed the first one, but like that apartment in that area in New York City is probably like between 12 and $15,000 a month, the size of that apartment. So like you, even with housing prices in like the suburbs of New York City being very high post 2020, like it doesn't really fully make sense, especially because he still had that job, which he was so certain to tell. um,
Yep. No, I agree. I
yeah,
agree. That was one of those
Edward.
things that slipped my, I mean, that's what I was getting at is that it just seemed weird that that was gone. So they give her this wishing wand, and that there was a weird transition for me though because obviously things are getting upsetting between she and Morgan. That's leading up to this like I'm over this, and she's like, oh, I'm gonna use my wishing wand and wish to fix this, and she wished that her life was a fairy tale. Which it's like, have you never seen a genie movie? Like you have to be very specific with your wishes. And
Hmm.
so, obviously that's the catalyst for the rest of this movie, which is 2 hours, by the way, which is,
Hmm.
I expected it to be an hour and like an hour and 30 minutes, not
Yeah,
2 hours.
yeah, yeah. Probably didn't need to be that long. Although I still enjoyed it the whole time. I thought it
Yeah.
was still well done, but that was sometimes these sequels are longer than the original.
Well, you
Um,
have to you have to introduce a lot of people. So you have to reintroduce us to the main characters, and then you have to introduce us to the new characters and protagonists and people along the way. And we had to meet a new city and like a new town and new people, and then a new
mhm.
problem, and then then there's the resolution of the problem. So there's a lot that had to be covered, I guess. But 2 hours for this kind of a movie usually is a little long, especially because they're usually geared toward families or younger kids. Now maybe younger kids, like maybe like you talked about earlier, this is for the people who watched the first movie and they're older now, so maybe that's okay. But I still think
Mhm.
it's geared towards families in general, so it feels like it should be a little more concise. But anyway, it surprised me. And now again, with Disney Plus, usually there's like the 900 languages we have to see at the end of the actors who helped out in different countries, and then there's also a long credits. So I feel like it's about 6 minutes of credits at the end. So the
At
hour, like
least, yeah.
it lists it at 2 hours and 2 minutes. Take 6 minutes off the top, but it's still about 2 hours.
Yeah.
Um, so she does all the things that to annoy Morgan as she possibly can. She goes to school with her. She messes her clothes get messed up, so she gives her clothes, which makes Morgan feel out of place. She like sings goodbye to her. Not cool to do, I guess, to a high school kid. And then just one thing after another with her to the point where just things were getting rocky and rough with them, which then makes her make this wish. And when she wakes up the next day, I'm confused at that point. Like I feel like there's something missing in that step because when she wakes up the next morning and she's in the fairy tale. I mean, was that not jarring to you a little bit?
I don't know. I think I was, if you're right, it probably is narratively jarring. I think at that point, I was just so glad this wasn't bad that like nothing could ruin it.
Yeah, that's true. Uh, okay. Well, so then once it's a fairy tale, there are a lot of references to other movies. And like I feel like I was probably reading too much into it. Like in the
Mm.
beginning with the animation and there's the firefly, I was thinking, is that Ray from like, Princess and the Frog? Like is that the reference they're making? Because he looks a lot like it in the shape that he's in. Um,
Yeah.
but maybe that's just how Disney draws fireflies now. I don't know. And then as they wake up to this new fairy tale, Morgan's kind of dressed like I guess Aurora or Briar Rose, and
Hmm.
then you've got a lot of other references along the way. The broom kind of looked like the broom from Fantasia, maybe. I don't know. There was just
Yeah.
so many references at that
And
point.
before
Uh,
that, when they first met the neighbors come in and they're wearing like the pink, green, and blue dresses that are
right,
like the
exactly.
three fairies, and yeah, you're right.
I
It's
think
like
they were the
heavy
con.
with like little.
Yeah,
not
I was
like
gonna
that.
say I think they were the contractors, but as soon as I saw them,
Right.
I was like, this is definitely meant to be Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather.
Hmm.
And they kind of do when they go into this fairy tale world. They are fairies, and so they do. She asks them to babysit. Tells them, but
Hmm.
to babysit. But so like this reference, like here, as soon as I saw the broom, does that not look like Fantasia? I mean,
Oh
like
yeah,
with the
yeah,
walking broom, and
no
so there are a
question.
lot of little references in here to other animated. I'm not well, other Disney movies.
Hmm.
There's some references with Beauty and the Beast. There's some references when they come into Andalasia, where there's a girl sitting around with sheep around a fountain, and she's reading, and all that stuff. But the big role of it is when she's walking through the town and singing Perfect. There's that one scene where she gets to the end of the street and she gets up on the crates, and then this water splashes up as if she's Ariel on the rocks. You saw that, right?
Oh, do you have a clip? Or like the still? I don't remember.
Look, I'll see if I can find a still of it. You didn't see that? Like that one stood out to me so much that I was like, maybe I need to see that again. But um,
I'm sorry to make you
yeah,
pull it up. I was
no, I got you. I
I
got you.
just yeah.
Let me make sure.
So Rob's so good about always having like the images at the ready, able to put them up. It's so great. Oh
I
yes,
just missed it.
yes,
I
yes,
just missed
I
it there.
do.
So she
Yeah,
comes
no,
up to the
I
top
know
here,
exactly what you mean. Yeah,
and then
there's the
it's like
splash.
part of your world, and then there's a
Yeah,
big splash as she gets down like this.
yeah. There. Oh
So
yeah, in that position. Yep, yep.
yeah, I mean
Great.
it was neat. That like all
Hmm.
these little references, and I could probably rewatch it like 100 times and not find all the ones that they were hiding for us in here. But I kind of love that. That that says to me,
Yeah.
hey, these are people who are huge Disney fans like we are, and they're going in and they're making they're
Easter
making these
eggs.
little reference and Easter eggs all the way through, and why not, right?
Yeah.
Then as she's turning evil, she's turning wicked, and she's turning into a wicked stepmother, which I remember. I don't know if you remember, it was in the news a year or two ago that this woman was upset with Disney because she was a stepmother, and stepmothers are always portrayed as being the wicked stepmother or the evil stepmother. And so I feel like this was perpetrating that stereotype because she the more she would call her stepmother, the more she would become wicked.
Hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. You're right. It's almost as like while she was almost functioning as her mother figure, that's fine. But as soon as she transitioned, like, and there was like a division, she's like, "Oh no, you're not my real mother. You're my stepmother." And yeah, that did play into that, which probably gives a lot of children a lot of anxiety when families structures change because they don't have um, any good examples of this. What the movie Stepmom from like 25 years ago? There's that one, and that's the only one I can think of. And it's certainly not a
No,
children's movie.
yeah, you're right. But again, that was it struck me because of that story and remembering that, and it struck me as, well, wait a minute, like they're just it's
Hmm.
perpetrating that same thing, and the more she calls her stepmother, the more she becomes wicked. Like her eyes glow. So in her being in this fairy tale, she didn't wish specifics about this fairy tale, which again, Genie Wish 101, she should have been very specific about what she wanted, but she went in and just said, I want a fairy tale. And in this fairy tale, she's the stepmother, and then they equate stepmother to wicked, and then she starts. Every time she looks up the clock and her eyes glow, or she hears something about stepmother and her eyes glow, she's becoming a little bit more evil. One
Yeah.
other reference that I thought was interesting was the Tyson Monroe, Maya Rudolph's son in this one, becomes sort of like Prince Charming in the outfit that he's wearing too. So it's very
Yes, I
much
saw
like
that. Yeah.
yeah. So again, really neat to see the way they reference all of these classic Disney stories, and Yvette Nicole Brown and I forget the woman's name from Glee. But their purpose was kind of almost to be like minions, but they end up being like
Hmm.
evil stepsisters
Yeah. Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah. I mean, they were kind of. It's almost like a Mean Girls situation where you have like everyone's following Regina George, and then you've got like her army of minions.
Yeah. But they were even dressed like the evil
Yeah, like Anastasia
stepsisters.
and Drizella. Hmm.
Yeah, and I was looking for a good shot of that because there was the scene where again they kind of turned into that, but it was the scene with where Pip as the cat goes back to steal the wand back, and the outfits they're
Oh
wearing
yeah,
are just straight out of Cinderella. So
perfect. Yeah.
yeah, so I mean that stuff is neat. I love when they do those references and you're watching, you're like, oh yeah, that's what they were trying to do there. That's kind of neat, and I think you had to see a few of them to then start picking up on that. Speaking of things you might have picked up on, you ready for a couple trivia questions?
Oh boy. Yeah. I
Which
will
it
not
seemed
have, but
I
let's
was about to
go.
say, which seems probably pretty unfair considering the fact that you've only seen this movie once in your life. I mean, it's not like we're going back to like the
Right.
Rescuers or something, and you're like, oh, yeah, I remember everything about that. But there were a couple things that I thought were small little things that you might have picked up on. So
Let's
just a
see.
couple. Yeah, here we go. When they are moving from New York to Monroeville, what moving company do they use?
I don't know. This is
Um,
always it's always the visual stuff with the words on things that I never pick up on. What is it?
well, I mean, and
Well,
that's what I was. Maybe that's just the stuff that I pick up on when I'm doing that because
it is.
when
It is. You're
when
so
I
good at that.
no, well, I mean, part of it too is that sometimes they will get an actual brand of something, and sometimes they make up a
Hmm.
brand. And in this particular case, Tri-State Hauling was the brand that they made up, and it's a 212 number, and it's not actually a 555.
Yep.
So maybe we should try calling that at some point. I don't know.
But
It's
does
definitely a
and
New
phone
York
number ever
phone number,
start with
though.
198? The one?
Yeah.
Also, like no, hardly anyone has 212 numbers anymore. Hardly any businesses. Only
Oh,
almost always 718 or 917.
sorry.
So
Well,
I suspect that's fully
once they
fabricated.
get moved
But yeah,
out
we
to
should
the
try calling.
yeah, right. Once they get moved out to the country, though, they have boxes all over the place. So they did callbacks with
Hmm.
it, which I think was pretty cool. Oscar Nunez was in this, which I love him. He was in The Office.
Yes.
He's been in things here and there, and he ended up somehow, and it felt very much like Once Upon a Time. Did you see that TV show Once Upon a Time? Do you remember that on ABC, where
I
it was
did. I
like,
watched the first like half season. It was good.
yeah, in that one, they um, the is it Carlo Esposito? Is that his name? The guy from Mandalorian. He was in this movie as or he was in that show as the Magic Mirror. But and then they go back and forth between real life, and this was kind of like that, right? All of these people who were in real
Mm-hmm.
life in Monroeville now become the characters as opposed to vice versa. And in this one,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, Travis becomes Prince Charming, and he becomes the Magic Mirror. What's his character's name though?
Ooh. I remember making the note that's like, oh,
Are you
there's
looking it
Oscar from
up?
The Office. Not looking it up. I have notes because I always forget stuff. But no, my only note was that it's Oscar from The Office. I did
Yeah.
not catch his
And
actual
funny
name.
enough, on The Office, a lot of the people like use their actual names, like
Yes.
Oscar
Yeah.
and Angela, which I think was kind of neat. It was Edgar, which I thought was weird. Like it didn't seem to
That is
reference
weird.
anything in particular. All right, so I'm just going to ask you one last one because I had a other couple other
Okay.
weird ones, but you don't need that. But this one you may know as a mom.
Okay.
When they break the curse at the end and they go back downstairs and Giselle is having breakfast with her baby, there's a box of cereal on the table. What is that box of cereal? What brand
Ooh.
is that box of cereal?
Oh, I didn't catch it. I'll just guess. Kashi.
Kashi. Wow, you are bougie.
Is that Bushi?
I feel like it's bougie. Captain Crunch is what I had when I was growing up, so I don't know. I don't know that there would have been Kashi just laying
I
on the
ate a lot
table,
of
but
I ate a lot of Cocoa Puffs in the 90s, but I feel like people eat less
okay.
of that stuff now. That's
Booberry.
great
That's my
movie
answer to
theater.
that. Booberry is my
Blueberry?
love. No, that's not what was
Oh.
on the table though. The because of the whole mom thing, I thought you might have recognized that there's a box of Cheerios.
Oh, a
They
Cheerios
go back to
box.
it back and forth,
Yeah.
and that goes back to what I was saying about like referencing like actual brands. Like sometimes you do and
Yeah.
sometimes you don't. I was watching Big Bang recently, rewatching that, and the links they go out to have cans of soda that have fake names on them was crazy. So they never had an actual branded
Mm,
soda on there. But at the same time, you kind of recognize what they were. That's funny to me
yeah.
that you would go to the trouble to have an actual box of Cheers, and they kind of show it from multiple angles at some point. So I thought
Yeah,
maybe
it's
just begin.
probably that probably is product placement then.
Yeah. Okay, that's
Cheerios
it.
paid for that.
That's it. So again, I got a couple other things to talk about here, but if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit like on this video, so it helps people to find it. Allison, thanks for letting me play a little bit of trivia with you. So let's get back to the story here. So once as this goes along, the way they portray the transformation of Giselle is that she's got a schizophrenia. She's talking to herself, which I thought was a weird choice. Like she's like there's the evil her and there's the her, and she's talking to herself. And sometimes they do it with like this, like when they were doing, they had Morgan here, and she would be this person and this person on this side, and it was an interesting choice to me. Rather, she would snap in and out of it. Sometimes she was lucid and sometimes she wasn't. What did you think of that?
I thought she performed it really, really well. You knew instantly what, like, who she was, like her whole, like the way she carried herself completely changed. And I was actually surprised because you don't ever see Amy Adams as a villain. And it was really cool to see her um, get to play that and slip into the role comfortably and not always be happy-go-lucky. So even
Right.
before she was Amy Adams, she's in one of my favorite movies of all time, which is Drop Dead Gorgeous, and she's before she became a redhead, and she's just like kind of a ditzy blonde in it, but she's in no way like a villain or a mean person. I've never seen her do that, and to see her do that, do it well, and be able to in less than a second completely change everything about her face to go back to normal Giselle was like really impressive.
Yeah. It always amazes me when we start talking about one little thing and it starts to roll in the chat. Cereal started rolling in the chat. Rosita said Captain Crunch peanut butter,
Hmm.
and then Arch Fox said that bougie cereal is Pashi because instead of Kashi, which he just pulled that one out like that. So good on you, man. Um, so yeah, I mean, the story with her going back and forth, I do think she did a good job. However, as it's getting further into it, and she's starting to go through the steps of turning into this, this evil person, there got to be a point near the end with the resolution where there were. It seems like there was no hurry for them to break this curse. They wanted to take it right down to the MacGyver 2 seconds when they were doing it,
Hmm.
and there was a lot of times where she could have just done anything to fix things, and it stretched out. So that may have been where you could have saved me 15 minutes of the movie is coming to the resolution a little bit earlier, because like rather than let's solve this right now, the rule was whatever happens by midnight is going to be there forever. And so rather than
Hmm.
the stroke of midnight being let's get it done before the stroke of midnight, Robert and Tyson decide to run off to the tower to hold the clock so that it doesn't strike midnight. It's like just fix it. Just fix it now. You don't need to run all the way up to the clock. And I get that maybe that made it a little bit more dramatic, but
They
that was
needed to
at this
give
point where I
those
was just
two
like,
something to do, I think.
I guess. I mean, yeah, I guess that makes sense. You're not wrong with that. So she has come up with this scheme that now she's gotten rid of Morgan. She's pushed her into the well and sent her back to Andalasia, because part of her sent her there because she wanted to be rid of her, and the other part of her sent her there because she was like, in her lucid state, you're the one that can save us. Go back to Andalasia and fix this. And so then, she's in Andalasia, Morgan's in Andalasia, and she goes to the tree of memories, and that's like this memory tree thing that they kept
Hmm.
trying to come back to and make this the saving grace that's going to save everything. I feel like that was a loose thing. Now they tried to push it on us several times. It got messed up
Hmm.
in the room when it got burned with everything else. It got thrown away. They tried to push it on it, but for that to be the thing that saves her or snaps her out of it, I feel like they could have done a better job with that one. That part of it seemed a
Yeah.
little forced.
Yeah.
But
I thought it was going to be a simple, like, kind of Frozen thing where it's like, oh no, you are my true daughter. So
that
kind
would have
of
been great.
recognition of that, not
That would
like
have been
a
yeah,
craft.
the craft. Yeah, so she rips up the paper and she throws it and it spins around her and all the memories come back and she's like, Morgan, you're great. And at that point again, she's lucid. She knows that she can save everybody. She should have saved everybody right there. She has the wand, but
Mhm.
then like it just all kind of falls apart there and somehow in all the mix up, Maya Rudolph's character poisons her and wraps her in vines, which and she's like, make your choice. It's Andalasia, and the entire world comes to an end, or your daughter here. And so then, she accidentally or on purpose drops the wand. It gets broken. And then she comes out of the sleep, and then they have their moment of truth, and she tells her she's a real daughter, and she's like, "What do I wish for? Or what do I wish for?" I don't know. And then it was so vague. Like what put them in that
Yeah.
problem was a vague wish, and what brought them out was an even more vague wish.
Yeah, I think that's right. What I think so for me, the takeaway though from this movie, like I think also as a parent, is like what gets you into trouble is when you like put your own expectations about what other people should be and how they should act on those other people, and you want them to conform to like whatever kind of serves you. And then what got her out of it was really like recognizing that like oh no, I'm going to love this person for who they are and their own agency, and that's what solved it. It wasn't a clean telling of that, but that's what I'm taking away from it.
Okay. Well, that's yeah. Like, did they learn their lesson? Did they like the power of family save them? um. So this whole thing kind of comes to a head, and in a very sort of similar way to the way the first Enchanted happened, right? Because you've got
Mhm.
the wicked, I guess mother is the one in the ballroom, and so it all kind of comes to a crescendo in the ballroom again, I guess. Um,
Mhm.
but when she finally makes the wish, she says, I wish I was home with my mom, and so I guess that she's learning that, and she goes back to it. But yeah, it seems a little vague, especially like, didn't we learn our lesson about being very specific about what you're asking for? Like, how about just wishing for, I wish everything would go back to the way it was?
Yeah.
And maybe that would have solved it. I don't know. Um, so again, I mean, a good cast. I always forget his name. What is the gentleman's name who was the genie on Broadway? It is James Monroe Iglehart. Iglehart. He was in it. He was the guy sitting next to him on the train. And I kind of knew with that threesome
Oh
sitting around
yeah.
him on that train that they were going to come back and sing at some point. It made sense because they seemed too out of place for just your average Joe commuter.
Mhm. And that whole
But
scene was like sort of neat. I guess they needed some reason the commuters talked to him, so that's probably why he grabbed had the sword to be able to like wedge those like cameos in.
yeah, but James Monroe Iglehart, he is amazing. Like I saw him at D23 sing Oogie Boogie song, and it was just so good. Never got to see him on Broadway as the genie, but he of course won a Tony for that role. So it's neat that he still does
Yeah.
these Disney bits from here and there. Griffin
I did see
Newman,
that. I did see him on Broadway. He's amazing. He's amazing
Griffin
live
Newman, who
performer.
was on the Amazon version of The Tick as
Mm.
Arthur. He played the voice of Pip in this one. And then
Huh.
Alan Tudyk was in this one, who is like Disney's animated, good luck charm. He did like King Candy and the Duke of Wesselton and Duke Weaselton and like all of those characters. And he was the Scroll in this one, which
Mm.
I think he did a great job of it. But it sounded a lot like King Candy to me from Wreck It Ralph when you think about it. So Always good to have Alan Tudyk in a movie, though. So good cast. Alan Menken back with the music. Like I said, I feel like there was too much music, but some of it was really good. And then most of the actors came back for this one. It would have been neat to see Jodie Benson back in this one, just because she was Robert's
Oh
secretary
yeah.
in the first one. That would have been neat to see her,
Hmm.
especially since another throw to old Disney movies, etc. But
Hmm.
there was a lot going on in this movie between the Disney references, bringing back more music than you had in the first one, uh, you know, telling us how they got to where they were, putting us in a new situation, keeping us in touch with Andalasia and what was happening there. There was a lot to go through. I guess that makes sense why that was 2 hours. Anything else that we missed before we go into final thoughts on this one?
No,
No? Okay.
let's do
Um,
it.
all right. So, Allison, we've talked about the movie. We talked about the first one. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch our review of Enchanted. So we talked about the first one together. We've watched this one. We've talked about it for 55, 56 minutes here now. So the big question is, after you've watched this, it's a 2 hour presentation. There's a lot of good content out there, but Allison, would you recommend this movie?
I love this movie, and I've already recommended it to people because this is something where I think if we were not doing this show, I would have been afraid to turn it on and watch it because I would be afraid that it was going to be bad. That was my biggest fear going in it, and that it would taint my enjoyment of the original. But I actually loved it. I felt like it really fit with it was they were natural problems. They didn't feel like fabricated problems. I guess the move maybe a little bit fabricated, but that also fits with what a lot of families experienced in the last couple of years. A lot of families left the city and went to suburbs or exurbs, or more rural places, and so that's like a transition a lot of people are experiencing right now and can relate to. And they just did a really good job with the script, and and the performances are outstanding, and it's really, really fun and enjoyable. And I didn't feel like it was 2 hours. Even though when I first turned it on, I saw how long the time bar was and I got scared. It went really fast, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. And so I'd recommend it to pretty much anyone because, as you said, it's a family movie, but it's also like a movie for anyone, whether or not they have children or whether they're single men in their 20s and 30s who I also know have watched it, enjoyed it. Like this is definitely worth a watch, and I'm glad it was made.
Awesome. I was looking forward to this one. I was glad when they announced it. They actually announced it and then they put it on hold and then they came back to it again. So I'm glad they did it. I feel like though this is one that you absolutely need to watch the first movie to find out what's happening. There are some sequels that I think you can come into them and without seeing the original still enjoy the movie. I think Tron Legacy is one of those. Tron Legacy is a much better movie than Tron. I love Tron, but Tron Legacy is a movie where you could come in if you've seen the first one, you get it. But it stands on its own. This one, I feel like you really do need to go back and see the original movie. And I don't know many people who would watch this one first, but maybe if you didn't know it existed, I don't know if there's people out there who have Disney Plus who wouldn't have thought that. But right now is a tough time for content. There's a lot of good content out there between Netflix and the Wednesday show, which is fantastic. And you've got like the new Will Ferrell movie on Apple Plus, and you've got Disney Plus is throwing the Santa Clauses at us, and the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special and Enchantment. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I would still recommend this, but I would definitely recommend that you see the first one if you haven't, and maybe if you haven't seen it in a long time, make it a double feature. We always do a lot of that on Christmas Day. Is like, hey, let's just stay in and watch something, and so it may be a good time to watch these back to back. But I think it was a good companion to the original. If I'm choosing between the two, the original still is a very special movie to me, and so I would definitely lean toward that one. But it's a good companion movie to it, and you should check it out if you haven't already. I assume if you watched this, you probably have checked it out, but if not, go ahead and check it out. We're going to start doing some holiday movies in the next 3 weeks. We're definitely going to review Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. We have a couple others coming up too, so we'll let you guys know about that. But Allison, I can't thank you enough for coming on and talking about this with me and watching these with me. I really appreciate it. It always throws me back to the Park Center days when you were on there. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy
My
schedule to do this.
pleasure. Thank you for having me. I love coming on the show.
And everybody who's been watching tonight, we appreciate you. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget that we have Disney Entertainment News Today on this channel. That dropped yesterday. We also have News Tonight coming up. And then we have the return of Park Center on Sunday night. So please join us for all of this great content. Subscribe to WDWNT TV. Give this video a thumbs up. Tell a friend. And we will talk to you soon. Have a great week, everyone. Take care.